Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. You know how there's that little bit of friction on the left between people that mainly talk about things like Brexit versus people that mainly talk about things that feel more substantive, more real world, like austerity and the mental health and disability crisis? Well, despite still supporting Brexit, Keir Starmer just made it perfectly clear that the issue is both. That you can't really fight one without the other.
That our welfare state is trapping people not just in poverty, but out of work. Young people in particular. And that is a poverty of ambition. We must also reform the welfare state itself.
Translation, I'm going to cut your benefits because having benefits means you don't want to work.
If you're not given the support you need to overcome your mental health issues, or you're simply written off because you're neurodivergent or disabled, then it can trap you in a cycle of worklessness and dependency for decades.
Now, he's correct in pointing to the fact that if people are diagnosed with mental health illnesses or disabilities, then they should be given the support they need to be able to get on with their regular lives. But the narrative that the problem we need to deal with is that people are being diagnosed too much as being essentially unable to work, and not the fact that there is a mental health crisis, is especially fucked up, especially when we know that all the evidence shows that the mental health crisis, A, exists, and B, is directly tied to the massive cost of living crisis. Like, I find it insane the number of politicians who simply ignore the fact that the UK went through a pandemic that completely overwhelmed our National Health Service, meaning that many people had their illnesses go untreated for years, which in and of itself means that many people simply won't be able to work now. On top of the fact that the excess poverty, the fact that people know that even if they're earning the same amount, it's not going to cover their basic necessities, is driving people towards mental health conditions like anxiety. And yet our politicians keep acting like the core problem here is people getting signed off from work too easily, or as Keir Starmer calls it,
the poverty of ambition.
And Keir Starmer's using that to justify cuts to welfare support. And given that earlier this year, the cuts that he was planning to do, according to his own government analysis, would have pushed 250,000 people into poverty, this narrative of blaming people with mental health conditions for simply not being ambitious enough is dangerous. But then we get to why he's doing this.
That costs the country money, is bad for our productivity.
Now, when he says productivity, what he's talking about is how much money is flowing around our entire economy. It's another word for GDP, or it's what they mean when they talk about growth. So the effect of what he just said is, I'm going to be effectively punishing disabled people because we don't have enough money in this economy. And this is where Brexit comes in, because this is how he finished that exact same speech.
Trade, vital for productivity, essential for growth, crucial to the cost of living. There is no credible economic vision for Britain that does not position us as an open trading economy. That the Brexit deal we have significantly hurt our economy. And so for economic renewal, we have to keep reducing frictions. We have to keep moving towards a closer relationship with the EU. And we have to be grown up about that, to accept that this will require trade-offs.
So by Keir Starmer's own logic, we would not have to be cutting the financial support for people who have disabilities and mental health conditions if it wasn't for Brexit. Because not only would the government have an additional £40 billion a year to spend on things like financial support for people with disabilities, but because undoing Brexit would lower prices in the shops, that would reduce the impact that the cost of living is having on our mental health crisis. So it's kind of weird for him to be saying that we need to be grown up and accept that there are going to be trade-offs when it comes to undoing the damage of Brexit, when he's the one sticking to Theresa May's red lines that she made up in 2017 about how being out of the EU had to mean being out of the single market and out of the customs union. Because let's be clear, it's possible to be outside of the EU, like countries like Norway, but still follow the same rules as the EU so that anything made in your country is automatically legal to sell in the EU and vice versa. Because that avoids the Brexit paperwork that is currently crippling our economy. And one of the journalists even called Keir Starmer out for that.
You mentioned you want to drive faster on trade. Your current proposals for the EU are not economically significant.
Which is true, because this press conference is about the government's budget, and the budget is essentially calculated by the Office of Budget Responsibility, and in their documents it shows that the improvements to Brexit that the government is trying to make will only improve our economy by maybe 0.24%. Meanwhile, in those same documents, it shows that Brexit overall is costing our economy about 4%. So this government is being very, very explicit to our faces that Brexit is a huge part of the reason that there isn't enough money in our economy. And they say they're trying to fix that, but their own documents show that they know they're not going anywhere near far enough. And as a result, the cost of living crisis is going to keep getting worse, and they're going to keep cutting welfare support, which will in turn make the mental health crisis even worse. So the fight against Brexit, the fight against austerity, the fight for disability rights, they're all linked together. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.